In 1977, something exceptional took place. People from all over the world who had scientific credentials assembled in Acapulco, Mexico, with Pedro Feliz, who was really the Walter Cronkite of Mexico, to look at the possibility that we were entering into a new age of contact. Some would say now disclosure.
Right. And that's where, your information comes in about what you've studied about the environment. And also, how do you explain the coming disclosure and worldviews?
Well, I think they're here for two reasons. One is that they are anti-nuclear in that sense. And the second is the fact that they see what's going on with the environment. When there was the Ariel School incident, what the kids got out of that was the fact that they have to protect the environment because things are really going on.
Yes. So the Hurtaks have written a chapter in this book, Making Contact, where I give an overview of many levels of contact. And Grant Cameron's in there, Whitley Strieber, who we'll hear from tomorrow. And the Hurtaks have written a very important chapter describing the levels of these beings that we are interacting with. There's the physical beings, there's the ultra celestials, as you call them, and the higher, let's go through the three.
The extraterrestrial.
Right, that's physical.
The extra celestial, and these are beings that have maybe incarnated here, but now are kind of spiritual guides and working around helping people. And then there's the ultra terrestrial, which some equate with the angelic messengers.
Or the avatars of ancient times found in the sutra literatures of India, China, Tibet, etc. What I want to emphasize, though, is your chapter 3 is the smoking gun, because I relate to a major conference that took place in Mexico City in 1979, where I was able to show actual pictures from Mexican authorities of the quote unquote alien specimens. And I believe this is one of the reasons why there was this pushback years ago, because the specimens are not beautiful people from European origin, but many of them have what we will call insect-like faces and features, and this is quite shocking from the standpoint of sociology and biology.
But some of them do look like us. Actually, if we can show some slides, I know it's not so easy on.
But before you do that, I just want to set it up that the reason the Hurtaks can make these interactions with the phenomena is because of this book that Dr. Hurtak wrote called The Book of Knowledge, Keys of Enoch, where he had a higher consciousness experience. And when you have an experience, and Desiree was right there as well, when you have a higher experience, your understanding of reality shifts. And that's what we really want to present here today, how to expand the nature of reality so we can start making contact, because if we're locked in this little box, all we see is our little world. When you have an experience that expands your level of consciousness, you can start to see there's a bigger reality out there. And that's what all the speakers today are really going to be covering, how to expand the worldview so we can incorporate a greater experience for the human being. So do we want to say
I wanted to show this one picture. The second section shows the symbolism of the Divine Mother, and then the ATP in the center, the basically adenosine triphosphate mechanisms of the human biological system of transduction that can allow the seed form of life to go in a variety of directions. The keys of Enoch are important because they correctly forecast the year 2004. This is in 1973, that there would be a watermark from intelligence coming out of the ocean specifically that would shift the scientific community into the positive side of recognizing the paradigm has changed.
And you knew that when you wrote this book in 73.
I wrote this book under inspiration that there was not only the extraterrestrial, but what Desiree has just said, the extracelestial and the ultra-terrestrial, the bigger picture, which is one of the reasons why the powers that be have not put all the cards on the table, is that the roadmap is too complex.
But you had a vision of a bigger reality, so you were able to see beyond time and space.
Well, let me qualify that. And Dr. Hurtak was actually taken into those other realities, and it wasn't channeled information and any of that, but he literally, and it wasn't a spacecraft. That's the other thing. What we're trying to say is there's these different levels of reality around us, and that we can experience higher realities or local realities. The local realities of the extraterrestrials we consider really aren't that much different from us. I mean, yeah, there's people who are in Buddha-like realities on this planet, and then there's actually those people that are a little bit on the negative side on this planet. That's what you get from the extraterrestrials. You get the variety.
In my experience, which was documented, and this is one that I had 24 years ago, after my original experience in 73, was when I was using Hebrew Aramaic mantrams in Mexico, in the area of Tulum. A energy field of light came over my body suddenly, and I was in prayers with the indigenous. One of the persons there was able to capture this in a few seconds, suggesting that we had to understand the work of the indigenous heritage, because that was the middle ground between the scientific on one side and the Orthodox religious traditions on the other. The experiential side, the emotional side, the psychological side had to come into central focus.
Well, let's try to communicate that today using the understanding you have from the higher dimensions, the stuff, the knowledge you have of the indigenous people. How do we communicate the need for an expanded reality, and that you can
I think,
experience?
unfortunately, we're going to be pushed into that because this reality is not doing so well. So how do you know to be in the right place at the right time? How do you know what technology needs to be developed? All this is coming from, we'll say, it can come, I should say, from a higher insight, from higher realities. We live actually in Silicon Valley, and there are many scientists that we know that in their dreams at night get the vision, get the information. And so this is really something that we have to start being aware of. And it ties back into remote viewing, which is
and why do the indigenous have these experiences and say no big thing? This is reality. And those of Western education say, well, I'm not sure. I think it comes back to the realization that we've got two sides of the brain. And if we don't emphasize what we call the right side of the brain, which is the multidimensional, the non-local, the metaphysical, symbolically the spiritual, that would be the feminine inner side, we get trapped in only the analytical side, and this doesn't make any sense. And so we have to develop, as it were, a holistic vision.
Right. That's what Neil was saying about the technology, the Newtonian mechanistic world. And obviously these craft are using not only a greater technology, but a greater consciousness of thought, so they can tap into something that's beyond this very narrow frame.
Right. So that's what we've all been talking about, including you, Alan, about the psionics. Is because, and this has been known, we did this back in the 70s, shortly after Dr. Hurtak's experience, but also people do it in CE5s, that your mind can align and tune into these vehicles, even to the point of not only communicating, but perhaps even directing, in some cases, them to you. And ultimately, yes, the vehicles don't have a little joystick that they fly around with. They actually work with, we'll say, the vibrations of the mind. You see this in the Stargate TV series, that the colonel is able to sit in the chair and make things happen because he has the right vibration.
And they're tuning into the craft, which Grant Cameron said yesterday are actually living beings. That's a little hard for me to
I do want to emphasize that there are special terms now that we must be acquainted with. Psionics, of course, comes from the 1950s. Science fiction writers. It's a term that has what I will call ambiguities. I think the better expression would be the paraphysical and the psychotronic side of recognizing that we have energy skills that are measurable. We're not dealing with simple abstractions, but we're dealing with things that show material direction, measurable situations from remote viewers, and we would call sensitive minds in all parts of scientific work.
Yeah, that's where humanity is going, to create this sensitivity of mind. So we have to drop out of the old paradigm, the old very limited mechanistic left brain logical way of thinking, and realize, as they do in the telepathy tapes, that there's another mind that you can use in order to understand a bigger reality.
But what I want to emphasize, the studies that we were able to publish with the late Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, was a friend of ours who worked at Stanford Research Institute, and Lawrence Livermore, one of the top minds in the world who should have gotten the Nobel Prize, unfortunately passed away prematurely. But this book
Mind dynamics.
is really the true X-Files. It's the top scientists, mathematicians, physicists at Stanford Research Institute, also in collaboration with others through the think tanks in the United States, who showed that the most important scientific breakthrough in the latter part of the 20th century was the fact that we are local and non-local human beings.
Exactly.
We're multidimensional beings, able to project our mind to distant places, retrieve information without the use of technology, and bring that information back that can be deciphered or documented through actual measurement processes.
And I always like to emphasize, you think you're going to do that, like the CIA paid for investigations of what was going on in Russia years ago in the 70s. But Ingo Swann showed us you can remote view Jupiter, and he saw the rings around Jupiter. Everyone said, "Oh, you're wrong, it's Saturn." He goes, "No, I know what Jupiter looks like, right? You talked to him about this." And in actuality, we feel you can go even beyond Jupiter into the higher cosmos and also remote view.
Well, Dr. Hurtak here saw that there were pyramids on Mars before they were published. He called NASA and said, I'm getting a vision of pyramids on Mars. And he said, by the way, there are pyramids on Mars. And he published the first picture of those pyramids in this book, The Keys of Enoch, which you can see there if you hold it up. But
in essence, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity, as a result of my higher consciousness experience, to see mathematical relationships, not only of the pyramids on Mars, but areas underneath the pyramids of Giza, Egypt, and also where we would go under the ocean off of Taiwan and Japan to find underwater structures. So what I'm saying is the Keys of Enoch represent a tangible roadmap where we were able to execute expeditions with remote sensing technology as well as underwater technology to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the life curve we call human evolution is being now subjected to an update, a penetration by other life forms. The question is, and this is now from all of the government scientists that I've talked to, is this to the advancement of humanity or the surrender of certain genetic prerogatives that we have? Are our precious bodily fluids being taken from us without our permission and ethics being violated, or are we, so we say, co-participants?
I don't think it's an either or thing, and there's many species we're dealing with many different agendas. I think overall we're here to evolve our consciousness and expand.
But you can understand the government scientists, and we have some of the best minds in the world from the top universities in the United States and Europe who've been working on this behind the scenes for more than 50 years. And the situation is the public, in my logic, was not prepared until recent time to accept the fact that certain individuals could be taken without their permission and have their body fluids or their sexual realities manipulated without their consent.
Absolutely. That is a big point of controversy.
But
I
on
agree.
the other side, which is, I think, the side you're bringing up and others have yesterday, that there are really positive intelligence that are trying to help humanity. So we're going to just go on. And Dr. Hurtak and I actually very closely work with astronaut Gordon Cooper.
His famous book, Leap of Faith, published in 2000, tells the American authorities it's time really to go beyond cover up and to put the cards on the table.
But in 1951, he actually was flying over the border of East and West Germany, and he looked up, and the Russians were there too, and their MiGs looked up and saw a flotilla, not just one, a flotilla of spacecraft. He came back, reported it. What did they do? Make him an astronaut.
They didn't throw him into a
crazy
house. They made him an astronaut. And Gordon became a very good friend of ours, a man of faith, a man of great credibility. We participated with Dr. Sidney Sheldon, famous novelist, in a book called The Doomsday Conspiracy. And Gordon and I worked behind the scenes to bring forth information that was presented at the United Nations, as well as scientists who sort of slipped away because they knew too much.
But let's go on, because he writes in his book about Harry Truman. He was one of the few presidents that really was willing to come out and say something. He said, I can assure you that flying saucers, given that they exist,
he's confirming they exist,
absolutely, are not connected to any power on Earth. And I like it back in the, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, because now we have a lot of that UFO technology, but there's still amazing things going on all over the planet that can't be explained by will say, you know, ours or Russia or China's technology.
So some of my work was behind the scenes with several of the Brazilian scientists and military specialists who were able to use exotic technology to take pictures, as we see here, of one flotilla of ships that appeared over the small city of São José dos Campos in southern Brazil in 1986. I was able to secure documentation, which I gave to American authorities, and also this made its way eventually to the BBC. You can see there on the left the strange formation. Each of those spheres are as large as an American football field. There's a strange V-like pattern that is seen in the sky. On the right side, I'm there with my Brazilian counterpart, presenting the documentation that reached also the areas of scientific knowledge. NASA was not prepared at that time to make commentary. This was all done privately behind the scenes. But this session that I had with Brazilian leaders and later European government leaders was the United States should put the issue on the table that we were indeed being visited. The interesting sighting in Brazil was the vehicles, what we'll call them ultra-terrestrial,
or light ships, actually, would be a better term.
Made their appearance over a nuclear facility that was being built privately that even American NASA authorities were not aware of.
And so, of course, now Lua Elizondo has come out with the Colares case, which is also in Brazil. Brazil is actually a hotspot for UFO. So it's very important. Again, they counted 21 UFOs here.
And those individuals that Elizondo refers to, actually, the Ochoa family were my colleagues. We worked together 20 years before Elizondo got involved in this.
So the question is, when did the cover-up start? And a lot of people point to Roswell, but actually, if you want to really get into it, in 2010, 5,000 pages of correspondence was released to the Ministry of Defense and the National Archives for the public in England. So, and it showed that Prime Minister Winston Churchill ordered a UFO cover-up on the 5th of August, 1944, due to a confirmed military sighting of a UFO. So they actually saw, knew, and everything that there was UFOs watching the war. This was during the war.
Yeah,
and the fact that they're identified makes them also IFOs, identified spacecraft, because there is obviously a larger consensus as to the shape, the form, the variety of velocities.
On Michael Schreck's presentation yesterday, he talked about the long history before Roswell of UFOs that the U.S. has in its possession.
It's interesting to know that Harry Truman did call Winston Churchill because of the events in Great Falls, Montana, and the American Southwest.
Right.
When he was president, and asked Winston Churchill, should this be released? Mm-hmm. And Winston told Harry Truman, the people of Earth are not prepared for it. So we have, from the highest levels of authority in the American government and British government, the fact that the consensus was, no, this would have to be put on the back burner.
And I just want to say, so later the British intelligence chief said that on average, one sighting was reported a week way back during the war. So now let's get into, of course, everyone's seen this, hopefully, and if not, go to the YouTube, you can see it. This is the July 26, 2023 House of Representatives.
This was an historic occasion where former military appeared in front of a congressional committee telling them the truth. This is the beginning of the unraveling of disclosure with Ryan Graves, David Grush, and David Fravor.
But this is even more of an historical meeting because Alan's in the picture, right, sitting behind Danny Sheehan.
There you see the white,
he's the middle white
paper
shirt.
of Alan.
Thank you.
Alan, you're part of the team. And then on the upper right, you'll see that myself and Desiree were also able to come in.
We were part of the watch party of Alan of New Reality.
This was the second biggest congressional hearing with Lou Elizondo, Admiral Gallivant, Michael Schellinger,
and Gold,
and so we're making progress on that front, but it's slow leaking drips of disclosure.
Actually, what you have in your book, actually said what they're trying to say.
Yeah,
that was 50 years before.
Thank you.
In other words, what we're saying is what I will call a preliminary, I would call a dog and pony show to get the American public to come to their senses. Here we have very erudite people from all ranks of government and backgrounds who are saying this is time to grow up.
But what was so important about that hearing is that Anna Paulina Luna came out with some very insightful questions. Obviously, she knew more than the other congressional leaders because she asked these questions.
And now she's part of this truth committee that's bringing out everything from JFK to whatever else. Anyway, and hopefully UAPs. Yeah, here are some of her questions. She asked actually 7 questions. I'm just showing you the last 3. In our previous panel, she said we had David Grush, and he had testified to say that some of these are interdimensional beings. Can you speak on that? I mean, give me a break. She is the House of Representatives from Clearwater, Florida, in that region, and she's asking if these are interdimensional beings. Actually, she was the most exciting part of the entire House of Representatives hearing, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so it proves that they are aware of this. We just want the word out to the public about what's possible. People don't even understand interdimensionality, but that's why I'm talking to the Hurtaks today.
Right. So let's look at also question 6, and this is just a short part of it.
Mr. Gold now from NASA. If you can answer this real quickly, some of these aircraft, it seems that they are operating off an energy that we do not currently have. But just yes or no, in your opinion, if we were able to obtain that, would that impact humanity for the better or negative?
What was his
answer?
Actually, I think he just went on to talk about the technology and didn't say what it was all about. But now the third question, and of course our time is short, otherwise we'd love to talk all day. Do any of you come across reports of people who claim to have had firsthand experiences with these entities, whether they may be or these aircraft, and then as a result, whether or not they are religious, that means the people who they're encountering, find that these things automatically disappear? What a question.
What a wonderful question.
But we just got word from Jacob Barber that is true. People are interfacing with this craft. He had a spiritual awakening, basically, because he picked up one of these crash retrievals. Now, who's this
I would
woman?
agree with him completely. In my experience, there was a divine feminine form.
Right, that's what he said. Now, this woman is really interesting.
Well, she found a man that picked her up off of the mountains of Drakensberg in South Africa and took her to Alpha Centauri and actually impregnated her. And this is all in the 1950s. Elizabeth Clark was contacted while in the Drakensberg, and she was later taken to actually now, in this case, the planet itself was on next to Proxima Centauri because there's 2 star systems. It's a double star system. And there she stayed on the planet for 4 months. It's called Meton. And she gave birth to a son on the planet and called his name Erling. Now,
so we met her in South Africa years ago. She was interested because in the Keys of Enoch, the name Meton is mentioned. And the fact of the matter is, we recognize that she had information in her notebooks of mathematics that she normally would not have, just as being a normal citizen of South Africa.
So she lived off planet, you're saying?
Yeah, for 4 months and had a child.
On Proxima Centauri, a planet around Proxima Centauri.
And Alpha, because there's...
She later spoke publicly before the House of Lords in England. She spoke before major groups in Germany and Europe. She was considered crazy by American authorities. But Cynthia Hine of MUFON in South Africa felt it's up to you, the public, to come to your own conclusion.
Right.
But what really happened is that while she was flying in the craft to go to this place, and they had picked her up again they picked her up many times, but one time to go there permanently for 4 months, she asked, who are they? Why are they here? All this stuff. And she said, and she was told the radiations in this sun system had become too intense for the well-being of their species, and they were forced to live underground. This, of course, was not to their liking, so they moved off the solar system altogether. They were told they had lived one time or before this in Venus, Earth, and Mars, and they had to vacate Venus because of solar flares. So just an interesting topic that she was told this back in the 50s. And of course, now we're being bombarded once again with solar flares, and our magnetosphere is weakening.
So could Venus be a meta symbol? In other words, not so much Venus, but the concept of a new planet or a new place in space?
Or could it be that Mars has a lot of bases underground because they also realized without the magnetosphere that's protecting their field, they had to live underground, which is why we don't see the intelligence.
Well, I've seen evidence under close examination that there are underground structures in Mars that raise a question that previous time cycles would suggest extrasolar intelligence was here probing our solar system and building bases of observation, not only on Mother Earth, but also on our sister planets.
Now, Alan asked me about environmental things. Well, here's the Popocatépetl
What are they trying to tell us?
volcano, and they are flying over. Now, someone like Jaime Melson, who's a good friend of ours, thinks that that's one of their bases. I say, no, they're just protecting the population. They have ways to neutralize the volcano from going off because it's only 54 miles southeast of Mexico City, and that's a population of 9 million people. It's still going off now, but you see more and more UFOs flying around it because they know how to neutralize that, and hopefully they can keep it under control.
So this is a very big picture. Certainly, it's provocative. What are government authorities, educated scientists to do? Desiree and I are highly educated. We have serious credentials from major universities. We know that our colleagues were rather reluctant to see this as a bridge to new reality back in the 1970s and 80s. But finally, after 50 years, Russian scientists, and those in Kazakhstan also, have come out by recognizing that there is a higher methodology behind our biological / genetic.
Because I think the most important question, Alan, and you're in on this too, is who are we? Right? How did we get here? Did we really evolve from apes and from amoeba? Or is there an alien message embedded in our
would this
genes?
be related to the Anunnaki?
Actually, the Anunnaki, we believe, came and tried to corrupt our genetic pool. Dr. Hurtak, in his book, was shown, and you can see this on the right-hand side, that we have a divine code structure. It's a 64-letter code structure that makes all the amino acids and proteins of our body. And basically, even Gary Nolan, who you just interviewed, Alan, it's a great interview. I heard you had
this was all studied by one of our colleagues at Area 51 and by German and Russian scientists. And so you see a very elaborate matrix code where the Hebrew letters of the divine name, Yod He Vod He, relate to the 4 basic building blocks: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen.
And Dr. Hurtak says this in 1973 when he wrote the book. And Gary Nolan says now that DNA and its structure of life seem to be 9 billion years old. The Earth is only 4 billion years old. How do you put 2 and 2 together?
Well, this code goes other levels of complexity on the Max Planck scale. So scaling up, we realized we were a micro intelligence, but through consciousness, the macro and the micro intelligence levels can converge. We can have coexisting timelines. Coexisting timelines means that we can communicate telepathically or using powers of ESP or beyond to understand the roadmap, that we are not alone. We share biological space with other life forms that we may not see with the visible eye, but we can see with technology, or the spiritual eye, commonly called the pineal gland or the third eye.
Well, we'll get back to who we really are, but I just want to show, because Dr. Hurtak and I have traveled with Neil and Alan to Egypt. And of course, the pyramid is always really interesting. And here's a UFO taken in 2019 by the Navy. Here's another one that was filmed. This is a real thing. I'm not going to play any
Or
videos.
actually over the Pentagon.
Over the Pentagon in 2018, I believe it was, in the early mornings.
And that's interesting because if you can look off the screen now to what I'm holding in my book, the first picture in the Keys of Enoch is showing a multicolor bluish violet type pyramidal structure over the earth with the scroll of Esther in the background, namely Esther's, whose name in Hebrew means starborn, or of the stars. Again, the idea is we have been incubated through the concept of the divine mother, or the mothering aspect of space.
So
let's realize that we're growing up.
So let's take a look. We believe the Great Pyramid, this is what Dr. Hurtak said also in 1973 and confirmed later by others like who have worked in Egypt.
John West
and others.
Robert
Bavell.
But they came much later than this original work.
But that the Great Pyramid, and also the Mayans understood this. One side points to Orion and Sirius, what I would say the masculine and feminine aspects of where we come from as a species, and the other side points to Alpha Draconis or Ursa Minor. This is areas where literally there is kind of a controlling mechanism.
So if we take seriously the Egyptian cosmology, the Great Pyramid, amongst being an energy collector, a sound device, a musical activator, is also an astrophysical star pointer to those systems coming from Orion versus those systems coming from Alpha Draconis, or what we would call the mischievous part of Draco in the sky.
So you can see how this all lines up. But I want to say, and we saw this, Alan, right?
Yeah.
That in the solar boat, there's all these different species. And that's really what I want to get
Take a close look now what Desiree is
You even
referring
see
to.
the serpent type of beings. You see the cat goddesses. You see human people. And then you see animals that have 4 legs. So, I mean, it's not that they thought everything.
But they all have
walked
human
on 2
bodies,
legs.
except they have
So
different
these were
heads.
extraterrestrials.
I believe it's a solar boat of the local universe that they were working with and could pick up on and understood.
We
Now,
would call them the experimental gods.
so who are we? Well, we're the Adamic species. Some people call us the Nordics. We inhabit various star systems, Arcturus being one, Meton, Pleiades, Orion, other places. And you're going to have people like Vivian Javet talk about
And we have
Arcturus.
the proto-human also there from Africa. So we're talking about people of all cultural backgrounds. We want to emphasize again that everybody's now beginning an opportunity to have a spiritual awakening, a consciousness awareness of the fact that there is divine source.
Right.
That we're dealing with a Godhead that respects us if we take the higher path of consciousness development, as opposed to those who violate us, take advantage of our naivete and free will.
And so that we like, I know a lot of people like the Anunnaki, but if you really go back to the to what's talking about in the book of Enoch and in other ancient texts, they knew we were a higher species. We're a higher species, actually. We can go and travel. Right now, we're limited because actually it's protecting us. We've been protected for the last 6,000 years. That protection is going away right now. But basically, they like our genetics and they like to manipulate that. That's how we got the giants. So in addition to Adamic species that look like us, we have those with the elongated skulls.
And here I'm being shown with a panorama of different skull types found in East Europe, Central Europe, and even in Peru. And then in the upper right of my screen, we see the elongated skull, the Paracas peoples and cultures of Peru and other parts of South America. Actually, the drawing is made by one of my students of one of the beings that appeared. So we have human-like Adamic features with eyes, the optical system, except that there are those who have a much larger head. And this has been disturbing to anthropologists for many years, except now the new page of anthropology is being turned.
And then Linda talks about the tall whites, and much of this is put into this book by MUFON called The Extraterrestrial Species Almanac, which cites 80 different extraterrestrial races. Dr. Jax talked about in the section of Arcturus, the Arcturus beings, because he mentions that.
But each of these species have a different perspective on reality. It's not just they look different, they think differently.
Look here, what we're seeing here, a very famous scientist in the middle of the pictures holding up a sphere. On one side of the sphere, there's the embryological development of the frog. And on the other side is the genetic code of the human embryo over 9 months. So how is that possible that the ancients could have this so perfectly imprinted on a sphere found in Ecuador? Alongside the female scientist, we see on the other side a bird-like feature. Surprise, some of our visitors have bird-like features. We've seen this in ancient texts.
Cat-like faces.
And even in the Gospel of Matthew, it says, where the eagles are gathered together, there the Son of Man shall be. So we have to go beyond the popular mythology and science fiction to realize, no, wait a minute, this is a quantum change. We're very happy to have had those great thinkers behind the scenes that have had to filter all this information. We've had to wait till the age of Steven Spielberg to show the other possibilities of encounters, but we need the emotional as well as the psychological, as well as the spiritual development and attunement if we're going to make sense of nonsense.
So one more picture of aliens, Pascagoula alien. We talked to J. Allen Hynek when he went to interview Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson.
As well as Dr. James Harder from UC Berkeley.
And they said, this sounds like a robotic intelligence. So, we're not the only ones developing robots. And some of them maybe have some sort of connection. Just really quickly, this is the Betwaters case, which was amazing. It was actually there to neutralize our nuclear weapons that we were having in the area of southern Britain.
According to other scientists involved behind the scenes.
And here's my favorite one.
Once you've seen a UFO, you're entangled with that intelligence. This is something Grant Cameron brings out in this book. So everyone out there, if you've seen something, your consciousness is linked. It's connected. You are part of the phenomena. There are no innocent bystanders.
Yes,
So-
exactly. And it really is this consciousness linkage. Well, we could see this in the
Ancient Indian traditions. This is important. This is part of our heritage from the Egyptian, the ancient biblical documents that speak of judging the angels or
This is
evaluating where we
actually
are.
called the Sea of Milk, and there's many
in
depictions
the
of this.
Indian Sanskrit tradition, yes, the Sea of Milk with the avatar at the center, and then you have the opposition around the center. We will call the Sea of Milk on one side, the Asuras on the other side, the Devas, and at the bottom, the turtle shell, which represents not simply Turtle Island, but the vehicle that he saw coming out of the ocean of unconsciousness.
Right.
So there's the extra celestials, which really kind of are the vehicles of energy, of light, but they can work
We bring us
around.
consciousness attunement and use music, a very important part of growing up. The use of music in vibratory physics to awaken body, mind, and
Well,
spirit.
that's what makes your teaching with the keys so important, because you add the elements of sound and vision to your text.
But he also came from a background of understanding the Far East. And look at this picture. I mean, what does it show? It shows that there's a mindset controlling and managing many aspects, but we're really just one little world of the multiple realities.
In the
of the tree of
1970s, I
life.
worked with scholars from UC Berkeley. We worked in India and Tibet to microfilm these very rare documents of cosmology, showing that we were basically in a schoolhouse and we had to learn the lessons of spiritual evolution, where there were forces that would try to negate us. On the other hand, forces that would try to bless us. So as the Tibetans have shown, as the Hindu traditions have shown, as the ancient biblical traditions and the indigenous have shown, in all parts of world culture, we accept the fact we're not alone in the universe, but there is a cosmic code in the biblical and the language, the Enochian tradition, the Torah, the Etzilut, the cosmic law that is the eternal one that has to be respected.
So I have to say, I love this film, Interstellar. I think everyone who's watching this should have watched it, but it actually shows us, I think, what's going on right now. If you remember, this astronaut, hero, went into other dimensions. He was able to come back really in terms of mental contact, only mental contact. Physically, he wasn't able to. Mental contact with his daughter, and told her how to save the planet. I think this is what's going on right now. We're getting messages, we're getting information from our higher selves, from other dimensional realities that are helping us save the planet and giving us pathways of how to also get off the planet and be cosmic beings once again.
Right. And it has to do with consciousness. When you activate the consciousness field, like these pictures show, you're expanding the nature of your understanding of reality.
Right. The Chinese traditions show us the many heads that we have as we evolve our chakras. Open up with the biblical writer, John the Divine, refers to the 7 seals. As we open up, we begin to see and work multidimensionally. Omnidirectionally, we begin to understand the cosmic Christ energy. On the far right of the screen is where I'm sitting. We see what the Russian and European scientists have shown, that there are these paraphysical dimensions that also open up. But we have to have the synergy to put this together. And thus, we are prepared to see what a student of ours has drawn from South Africa, the ultra-terrestrial beings who have no bodies, as we define them, but faces of joy, faces that have artistic beauty. Ultimately, we understand ourselves as multidimensional, non-local beings.
Yeah, this is when you do remote viewing. You're not going with your whole body somewhere. You're actually going with your consciousness mind, and you're not even traveling. This is something that Russell Tarth
This is
and
our
Elizabeth
book.
worked on, that found out that there is not a matter of traveling from one place to another. You're not sending and receiving. You are part of the consciousness.
Again, if we
world.
can look from the screen to what I'm holding, this is the
Well,
book
I
that
think
Russell and I put
Wait till
together.
we finish
In
the
1 minute,
slideshow.
I think it would be better.
This is a very interesting drawing that Desiree put together, showing a light being.
This is really what we're going to be ultimately seeing. You can see the physical, you can see the extra celestial, but then these are the ultra terrestrial.
Is this really who we are potentially?
This is our higher nature before we came into a 3/4 dimensional reality.
Right.
This is the 5th and 6th dimension of realizing that we have a consciousness
Beautiful.
that can take us in any directions, as we see here in these beautiful cosmograms or cosmic pictures found in the Keys of Enoch, which you can go for our website, keysofenoch.org. You see the multidimensional hierarchies, but there in the center is the female form Y. We begin with the right hemisphere first. The opening to the joy of life through the human heart, The mind then being conditioned to see and work holistically through energy, through sacred geometry, and through sound. And ultimately, as we expand from our three-dimensional self to our fifth-dimensional self, we begin to participate in the galactic or cosmic family. Seen
So
at the
a
top.
final picture. This is really who we are. We're going not only into the local universe, but we're also going beyond the local universe.
And the bars represent the musical chord structure within with the biomusic connected with the biophotonics
Right.
that are energized. And in the book that's advertised, the 76 names of the Divine Father, and other books that we put out, the 76 names of the Divine Mother, the 72 names of the Divine Mother, and the 76 names of the Divine Christ. These ancient names are also musical codes, how we energize ourselves, how we raise ourselves and put on the crown of glory, manifested in the life of the saints, the avatars, and the great spiritual teachers.
So we're going to go back, if we can, to
The normal
picture?
studio
Yeah.
setting.
Neil, can you just put us back? There we are.
So I'm holding the book that Russell Targ and I put out
And
some
we
time
just put it
ago.
up to the screen. This is called The End of Suffering.
And there in center is a very important picture by Ingo Swann, the foremost American psychic artist. There you see how the human mind opens up like a cosmic egg, and you see a whirling galaxy within that cosmic egg, or your higher mind.
This is the
You
multi-dimension.
overcome suffering, which is attachment to the three dimensions and the dualistic game being played out in politics, economics, and geo manipulations.
So
you realize in all of this, we are beings of the universe in human form. We are representing the cosmic mind in human experience.
So one of the key things from yesterday was, how do you end the trauma? A lot of people who've had experiences with ETs have had trauma.
Yes.
And this is a big topic. And we feel that it's understanding who you are, understanding that you're not alone in the experience, and understanding the multi-levels of cosmic intelligence. And you actually can bring in the higher consciousness realities, and you can experience those cosmic realities. Like Ingo Swann, remote view
But
Jupiter.
Sometimes, as Tara de Liberta said, sometimes a shock will open you to new possibilities because we're really locked into a very limited worldview. So based on your presentation today, what can people take away with them about meeting these ETs on an even playing field?
Well, in all of the investigations I've made in Brazil, privately with Dr. Heineck and others, with leading shamans in Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, there is a sense of understanding the joy of life. And that in order to put all this together, we have to realize we're here in this form to help the human race evolve, to raise consciousness. But that requires a sense of humility, and not to use only one side of the brain, the analytical left brain that leads to the pomposity of the mind as the male figure dominating all the situations, all the scenarios. We need the sense of what the Divine Mother represents in all of the cultures. It means a sense of sublimating our energies through music, through quietude of meditation, through artistic balance, reaching out with the sign of the rainbow.
Right.
And in my personal work, the understanding of the cosmic Christ, recognizing that we are but one of many families in part of a much greater galactic family of creation. We are just waking up in a vast and awesome universe to the divine spark of what we will call the consciousness of the creator within the cosmic.
So there's a greater hope. And I think that's important. When you see these other beings, whether they're doing something to your physical body, which in a certain sense, you should try to raise that consciousness to reach into greater beings who can help and protect. That's what Luna was saying. If they're religious, sometimes they just disappear. So if you call out to divine names or higher vibrations, there will be a change. But considering that you are just now encountering some of these greater beings, there is a greater hope, because we are no longer limited to this physical planet. We will be like those of Elizabeth Clark, traveling to the stars. We will be like those of the cosmic
children in
and the other
Africa.
point I think you're making with the spiritual knowledge, that we have to shift how we see ourselves in relationship to a bigger reality. We're not separate. Life is an abundant essence throughout the cosmos. We're not a freak of nature.
And if you
We
look
are
at all
part
of the
it.
stories, the classical stories of contact, they're always with music harmonic, whether it was Ezekiel chapter 3, whether it was the avatars in the Far East, whether it was the Christ child hearing, as it were, the coming of the celebration from the angelic dimension. Put this in modern scientific language, the ultra-terrestrial beings trump the extraterrestrials. We have to go to higher levels of symphony and synergy, and this requires a type of musical vibration we need every day to be as positive as possible.
It's vibration, and even Jacob Barber said it was like song. That was such a strange part of his testimony when he had this mental contact with the craft. He says it's like song. It's feminine. It was beautiful. So we need to go there if we're really going to make contact with these.
I would like to close with the testimony of King David in Psalm 122. Okay. He writes, "I was happy when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord." That house of the Lord begins in the tabernacle of our heart, in the vibrations of love for all humanity, in the recognition that there is a divine source, that we are being educated to discern the different levels of Jacob's ladder as we are brought into the realization of the house of many mansions, spoken about the Christ figure. We are now in a fantastic time of quantum change, but we must have the careful balance: music, education, harmonics, higher science of the spheres, what the ancient Greek philosophers called. The music of the spheres is absolutely necessary for balance and harmony.
And what's really interesting is really we are on the verge of first contact. This is going to be so exciting for everyone on the planet. I believe people have incarnated for this. And it's not only contact with extraterrestrials, because of the shift of our planetary system that's taking place, the magnetosphere and other aspects. I believe that contact actually can reach, or we can reach into higher levels of reality.
But at the same time, there will be ontological shock, as Tara spoke about yesterday.
Right.
We have to be able to be those emissaries and educators of raising consciousness and realizing there's hope in purpose. And this is a type of graduation into the university of the cosmos.
It's about letting go of the old ways of looking at the world, the old ways of seeing, the old ego structures, and embracing these bigger, I'll say, new realities that are awaiting us. So,
as you can see by the picture behind us, there is the opening now of the higher, what you call upper evolutionary frontier.
It's hopefully a view that all of us will soon experience. But
the
overview effect, as actually that was what stimulated astronaut Edgar Mitchell to get him into the idea of remote viewing and how we have a non-local consciousness and how on this